Welcome to Byte-sized L&D, your quick, no-nonsense update on the latest in workplace learning. Today, we're diving into the critical topic of toxic workplace behaviors and how learning and development can bridge the generational divide to foster mental health and psychological safety. All right, let's get straight into it.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another deep dive on Byte-sized L&D. I'm Donna, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, the ever-insightful Yakov. Today, we're tackling something that hits close to home for a lot of us in the learning and development space: toxic workplaces. And Yakov, I have a feeling this conversation is going to resonate with quite a few of our listeners.
Oh, absolutely, Donna. You know, there's this fascinating shift happening right now where we're finally developing the language and awareness around what constitutes genuinely harmful workplace behavior. And as L&D professionals, we're often on the front lines of these issues, aren't we? We're the ones creating training programs, facilitating difficult conversations, and sometimes being called in when things have already gone sideways.
Exactly! And what strikes me is how much this conversation has evolved, especially with younger generations entering the workforce. I mean, millennials and Gen Z workers are just not having it when it comes to toxic behavior. They're setting boundaries that previous generations might have been afraid to establish.
Right. And that's actually creating some interesting challenges for us in L&D. We're seeing this generational divide where older managers might have that suck-it-up mentality, while younger employees are saying, nope, my mental health matters. How do we bridge that gap in our training programs?
That's such a crucial point. But first, let's help our listeners recognize what we're actually talking about when we say toxic workplace. Because I think sometimes people confuse normal workplace conflicts with genuinely harmful patterns.
Lay it on me. What's the difference?
Well, it's really about persistence and pervasiveness. You know, an occasional disagreement or even a heated discussion isn't necessarily toxic. But when you're dealing with consistent patterns of behavior that create fear, silence people, or make them dread coming to work every single day, that's when we cross into toxic territory.
And it's not always the obvious stuff either, is it? I mean, sure, we can all identify the boss who's screaming and slamming hands on desks, but there are these quieter forms of toxicity that are actually more insidious. Passive, aggressive behavior, backhanded compliments, strategic exclusion from important conversations.
Oh, those are the worst because they're so hard to pin down. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. And as L&D professionals, we need to help people recognize that if they can't communicate clearly or directly, if they feel like they have to silence themselves to feel safe, that's a red flag.
You know what's interesting? There's been a real uptick in reports of toxic workplace behavior since the pandemic. And I think there's something to be said about how social isolation affected people's interpersonal skills. Socializing really is a skill set, and when it atrophies, workplace dynamics can get pretty messy.
That makes so much sense. And it creates this perfect storm where people are dealing with increased stress, decreased social skills, and often heightened job insecurity. No wonder we're seeing more reports of toxic behavior.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really relevant for us. When people are experiencing toxicity, they often internalize it. They start questioning their own perceptions, wondering if they're being too sensitive. That's where having trusted colleagues to talk through these situations becomes crucial.
Right. And that leads me to something I think we should emphasize for our L&D audience. When someone comes to us with concerns about workplace toxicity, one of the most important things we can do is help them document what's happening. Not just for potential HR escalation, but to help them trust their own experiences.
Absolutely. Keep records of troubling interactions, save inappropriate messages, document patterns of behavior. It serves two purposes. It protects them if they need to escalate, and it helps prevent gaslighting.
Makes sense. But let's talk about practical strategies too. Not everyone can just walk away from a toxic situation, especially in today's economy. What can people do to protect themselves while they're figuring out their next steps?
Well, boundary setting becomes absolutely critical. Sometimes you can negotiate ways to limit interaction with the toxic person, different shifts, different projects, remote work arrangements. It's not ideal, but it can provide some breathing room.
And setting internal deadlines for yourself, right? Like, I'm going to give this situation 2 weeks to see if there's any improvement. And if not, I'm actively looking for alternatives.
Exactly. Because here's the thing, and this is something we need to help people understand. Toxic individuals rarely change on their own. If someone is creating a harmful environment, the responsibility for fixing it shouldn't fall on their victims.
Oh, that's such an important point. It reminds me of that analogy about radon in your house. You wouldn't try to negotiate with radon or find ways to make it less harmful. You'd remove the toxin or remove yourself from the situation.
Perfect analogy. And as L&D professionals, we have a unique role here. We can create training programs that help people identify these patterns early, develop their communication skills, and understand what healthy workplace dynamics actually look like.
Absolutely. And we can also work with leadership to create psychologically safe environments where people feel comfortable speaking up about concerns before they escalate into major problems.
You know what else I think is crucial? Helping people understand that threats about employment references or "you'll never work in this industry again" are often empty. Toxic people don't usually have the reach or respect they claim to have precisely because their behavior is problematic.
That's so empowering to realize. And it ties into something else: encouraging people to research potential employers. Reading employee reviews, asking thoughtful questions during interviews about company culture, trusting their gut instincts during the hiring process.
Right. Because preventing exposure to toxicity is always better than trying to manage it after the fact. Although, let's be honest, sometimes you don't realize what you've walked into until you're already there.
True, but what gives me hope is seeing how the conversation around workplace mental health is evolving. People are becoming more aware, more vocal, and less willing to sacrifice their well-being for a paycheck.
And that's creating opportunities for us in L&D to be part of the solution. We can design interventions that address the root causes of toxic behavior, not just the symptoms. We can help organizations create cultures where psychological safety isn't just a buzzword, it's a lived reality.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, nobody should have to choose between their mental health and their livelihood. And when organizations prioritize creating healthy environments, everybody wins. Employees, productivity, retention, innovation, you name it.
Couldn't agree more. And for our listeners who might be dealing with toxic situations right now, remember that you have more options than you think. Document what's happening. Talk to trusted people. Set boundaries where you can. And don't let anyone convince you that you're stuck.
And if you're an L&D professional working to address these issues in your organization, remember that small changes can have big impacts. Creating safe spaces for dialogue, training managers on healthy communication, establishing clear policies about acceptable behavior, it all adds up.
So true. The ultimate message here is that toxic workplaces aren't just part of the job. They're preventable, addressable, and nobody should have to endure them. As learning and development professionals, we have both the opportunity and the responsibility to be part of creating healthier work environments for everyone.
Beautifully said, Yakov. So for our listeners, maybe take a moment to reflect on the culture in your own organization. Are people speaking up freely? Do they feel psychologically safe? And if not, what small step could you take this week to start moving things in a healthier direction?
Perfect call to action, Donna. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep advocating for workplaces where everyone can thrive.
Absolutely. We'll catch you on the next episode of Byte-sized L&D.
That's a wrap for today, where we explored how L&D can tackle toxic workplace behaviors by bridging generational gaps and promoting mental health awareness. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends and colleagues so they can also stay updated on the latest news and gain powerful insights. Stay tuned for more updates.